Welcome, weary traveler. You've left the noise of the world behind and stepped into a realm untouched by time. Here, candlelight dances upon ancient stone walls, and the air carries the soft hum of forgotten lullabies. Beyond these gates, the night is gentle, and every story is a silver thread, weaving warmth around your heart. So, rest your mind. Let each word be a quiet step into the halls of dreams, until sleep, tender and deep, finds you. You are safe here, and the world drifts away. Chapter 1: The Glow of an Impossible Dream. In a quiet kingdom where the stars seemed to linger longer than anywhere else, there lived an alchemist named Donovan. His keep was not grand like the castles of noble lords, nor loud with the bustle of apprentices and guards. Instead, it was a simple stone house tucked into the edge of the forest, its windows glowing softly at night like fireflies resting among the trees. Donovan was not known for potions of war or medicines of haste. His craft was gentler, slower, as though he were always listening to the steady rhythm of the night itself. By his hearth, Donovan kept scrolls filled with thoughts that few others dared to dream. Most alchemists sought to transmute lead into gold or herbs into cures. Donovan, however, was fascinated with something more elusive: the balance between night and day. He often sat at his wooden desk beneath the silver glow of lantern light, sketching diagrams of the moon, the tilt of shadows, and the way dawn slowly poured itself across the world. His closest companions, Lockwood and Sebastian, were not alchemists at all. Lockwood was a traveler whose boots had walked countless roads, carrying stories of valleys, rivers, and distant villages. He loved nothing more than to rest by a warm fire, his deep voice weaving tales until the listener's eyes grew heavy. Sebastian was quieter, a dreamer who adored the stars. He spent long hours gazing upward from the keep's balcony, mapping constellations in a little leather-bound journal, sketching arcs of starlight with soft charcoal lines. Together, the three formed an unlikely companionship. Their evenings were spent not in laboratories of urgency, but in quiet chambers filled with lamplight, parchment, and soft music from a stringed lute. Donovan would speak of his latest musings. What if night and day could be blended, so neither chased the other away? What if the world could rest in an endless twilight, gentle and calm? And his friends would listen, not with skepticism, but with the patience of those who valued dreams as much as truths. Outside, the forest echoed with the tender hush of nighttime. The wind slipped easily through the trees, making the branches sway like slow dancers. Somewhere in the distance, an owl's call echoed softly, answered by the gentle ripple of water from a nearby stream. All these sounds wove together into a lullaby that matched the steady flame in Donovan's hearth. Lockwood leaned back in his chair that evening, his cloak draped loosely around his shoulders. "Donovan," he said, his tone relaxed, "you speak often of this vision, to turn night into day, or day into night. What would it mean for those who live beneath it?" Donovan smiled, though it was not a hurried smile, rather the kind that lingers like candlelight. "Not to erase one with the other," he replied slowly, "but to bring them closer, a gentler balance. Imagine a kingdom where the harsh glare of noon is softened by silver starlight, or where midnight carries the golden warmth of dawn. It would be a place without rush, without fear, where the rhythm of the world invites rest as much as wakefulness." Sebastian, perched near the window, had been gazing at the stars as they wheeled above the treetops. He turned back, his voice soft as the night itself, like a dream that never ends. "Perhaps that is what you seek to capture, Donovan, not science alone, but the dream of harmony." Their words drifted into a silence so calm it seemed to hold the room like an embrace. The fire crackled gently, the logs sighing as they gave themselves to the flame. Outside, the moon climbed higher, its silver light painting the stone of the keep. Time moved slowly, so gently that it felt less like passing and more like resting. Later, When the hearth had grown low, the three stepped outside onto the little balcony. The air was cool, brushing their cheeks with the freshness of leaves and dew. Overhead, the sky stretched wide, sprinkled with countless stars. Sebastian pointed quietly, tracing constellations with his finger in the air. The archer, the crown, the swallow. Lockwood listened as if each constellation were a story, and Donovan observed with the calm wonder of one who sought to weave these lights into his experiments. The keep behind them glowed faintly, like a lantern in the forest. The village below had long since fallen into sleep. Only the soft glimmers of cottage windows remained. All was still, except for the distant whisper of the stream and the occasional hush of wind. Perhaps, Donovan murmured, almost to himself, the secret lies not in changing the world, but in teaching the world how to see differently. If night holds light and day holds shadow, then perhaps they are not opposites at all. Perhaps they are companions. His companions said nothing, yet their silence was not empty. It was filled with agreement, with the kind of trust that did not need words. As the night deepened, the three friends returned indoors. Donovan rolled up his parchment. Sebastian set his journal aside, and Lockwood pulled his cloak tighter. They moved toward the hearth once more, where the last embers glowed with soft warmth. The keep grew quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around the weary and guides them toward sleep. One by one, they drifted into slumber, not hurried, not forced, but carried gently by the stillness of the night. Outside, the stars continued their silent march across the heavens, watching over the alchemist and his friends. And somewhere between dream and waking, Donovan's vision lingered. A world of twilight, where night and day were not rivals, but a single, endless song of peace. The keep seemed to sigh as if in contentment, its stones warmed by the last breaths of the fire, its windows glinting faintly with the reflection of stars. And so, the first step of Donovan's journey was not marked by experiments or failures, but by the quiet decision of three friends to dream together. In that quiet, beneath the canopy of starlight, the seed of Twilight's mystery was planted, and it waited softly, patiently for the dawn. Chapter 2. The first experiment. Morning did not rush upon Donovan's keep. It unfolded slowly, like a curtain being drawn back by invisible hands. Mist lay heavy over the forest, silver and soft, curling around the trees as though it wished to linger before the sun's arrival. Birds stirred gently in the branches, their songs not sharp or hurried, but low and melodic, blending with the hush of the stream nearby. Inside, Donovan rose quietly. His footsteps were unhurried upon the stone floor, his robe tied loosely around him, his hair falling into his eyes as he lit a small taper. The glow filled the room with a faint, amber haze, casting gentle shadows across shelves lined with jars, scrolls, and glass vessels. The alchemist's keep was no bustling workshop. It breathed a calm rhythm, like a place half dreaming even in daylight. Lockwood was already awake, sitting at the wooden table with a cup of steaming tea in his weathered hands. His eyes were half closed, as if listening to the silence itself. "The mist is thick this morning," he said softly, his voice as steady as the earth. "The world seems reluctant to let go of the night." Donovan nodded as he poured water into a basin, rinsing his hands with careful slowness. "Perhaps the night wishes to teach us something," he replied. "If we are patient, it may reveal its secrets." Not long after, Sebastian emerged from his small chamber, still wrapped in a blanket, his hair tousled from sleep. He carried with him his journal, pressed against his chest as if it were a companion. "The stars were bright until dawn," he murmured. "I dreamt they moved closer, as though they leaned down to watch us. The three sat together at the table, the hearth crackling gently behind them. Donovan brought out bread and honey, simple fare that warmed their mouths and filled the room with sweetness. They ate quietly, content to let the silence stretch between them. For here, silence was not empty. It was a shared language of peace. When their cups were emptied and their meal complete, Donovan rose and led his companions into the small chamber he called his laboratory. It was not filled with gleaming metals or grand machines, but with ordinary things made extraordinary by care. There were jars of pressed herbs, bowls of crushed stone, candles burned down to their bases, and a large brass bowl polished until it reflected the room in wavering gold. On the central table lay a parchment, sketched with Donovan's idea. A circle marked by symbols, half bathed in golden rays, half surrounded by silver crescents. "This," Donovan said, laying his hand gently upon the drawing, "is where we begin." Sebastian leaned closer, his eyes following the soft lines. "A blending," he whispered, "day and night drawn together, as though one completes the other." Lockwood folded his arms, his gaze steady. "And how does one capture light, Donovan? Day burns with heat, night glows with distance. Can either truly be held?" Donovan smiled faintly. "Not held, but invited, just as one invites a friend to sit by the fire. Light and shadow may visit us if we give them a place." He prepared the room with slow, deliberate care. Upon the brass bowl he sprinkled dried petals of moonflower, white as snow, their fragrance faint and cool. He ground a piece of amber into dust and let it fall like grains of sunlight into the mix. Then he poured water from the stream nearby, its surface trembling as though it carried whispers of both day and night. The three stood in silence as Donovan struck a flint. A small flame leapt to life, flickering like dawn itself. He held the flame near the bowl, and its glow spilled across the mixture. For a moment, the surface shimmered strangely. Not golden, not silver, but both, as though the bowl held a memory of twilight. Sebastian's breath caught softly. "It looks like the horizon," he said, his voice hushed. Donovan did not rush. He only watched, his hands folded, his expression calm. The flame wavered, and for a heartbeat the mixture glowed with a soft radiance, warm and cool at once. Then it dimmed again, returning to the gentle stillness of water and petals. The room did not feel like failure. It felt like a beginning, a whisper that promised more. Lockwood exhaled, the corners of his lips turning upward. "It may not have lasted," he said, "but for a moment you held what you sought." Donovan dipped his finger into the bowl, letting the water touch his skin. "It is only the first step," he said gently. "The twilight is shy, but it answered. That is enough." The rest of the day passed in quiet rhythm. Donovan copied his notes carefully onto parchment, the ink flowing smoothly beneath his hand. Sebastian sat nearby, sketching what he had seen. The shimmer, the glow, the fragile balance. Lockwood stepped outside for a time, walking the forest paths, returning with fresh herbs and a calm smile. By afternoon, the mist had lifted, and the keep was filled with soft sunlight. It touched the wooden beams, the glass jars, the pages of their journals. Yet even in daylight, the memory of the shimmering bowl lingered. It seemed to hum gently in the back of their minds, a promise that twilight was closer than they had believed. As evening drew near, the three gathered once more by the hearth. The fire burned low, its embers glowing like tiny suns. Outside, the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, and the forest filled again with its nighttime song. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his hands resting loosely in his lap. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "to bring night into day or day into night is not to force one upon the other. Perhaps it is simply to remind them they are already together, always touching at the horizon." Sebastian closed his eyes, hearing the thought as though it were music. Lockwood sipped his tea, nodding with the patient agreement of one who had traveled many roads. The night embraced them again, softly, without weight. Their keep, glowing faintly with lantern light, seemed to settle deeper into the earth, as though it too were listening to Donovan's dream. and as they drifted toward sleep, the bowl of moonflowers and amber dust rested quietly on the table. Its water no longer shimmered, yet in the silence of the room, it felt alive, waiting, watching, as if twilight itself had accepted the invitation and might return again when the time was right. Chapter 3: The Village at Dusk. The day unfolded like a slow breath. Sunlight moved across the forest floor in golden patches, dappling leaves, glinting off the rippling brook that wound its way past Donovan's keep. The experiment from the morning lingered in their minds, not as a problem to solve, but as a melody that hummed quietly in the background, steady and reassuring. By afternoon, the three companions decided to visit the village nestled at the foot of the hill. The path to it was gentle, curving through meadows where grasses swayed and bees moved lazily from flower to flower. Lockwood carried a small basket with sprigs of rosemary and thyme, while Sebastian cradled his journal close, eager to sketch the sights of the day. Donovan, his robe flowing lightly around him, walked at a pace unhurried, his thoughts weaving with the song of birds overhead. The village came into view slowly, as though it wished not to surprise its visitors. Roofs of thatch and wood appeared first, glowing warm under the sun. Smoke curled upward from chimneys, soft trails dissolving into the sky. Children's laughter drifted across the meadows, not sharp or loud, but lilting, as if it belonged to the wind. At the village square, the rhythm was peaceful. Merchants laid out baskets of fruit and jars of honey, their voices low and friendly. A blacksmith leaned against his doorway, wiping his brow, though even his movements carried no rush. Life here unfolded at a pace that matched the turning of the seasons. Steady, inevitable, serene. Donovan paused at the fountain in the square's center. Its waters caught the afternoon light, sending ripples of silver and gold across the stone. He leaned close, cupping his hands, drinking slowly, the coolness spreading through him like a quiet blessing. Lockwood and Sebastian joined him, their reflections shimmering beside his own. "Even the water here seems unhurried," Sebastian remarked, sketching the play of light on the surface. "It moves, yet it never seems restless." "That is the way of balance," Lockwood replied, dipping his fingers. "It teaches without words." A few villagers greeted them warmly. They were used to Donovan's presence, the quiet man who studied stars and herbs, who never brought trouble, only peace. A baker offered them a loaf still warm from the oven. A shepherd paused to ask if the herbs Lockwood carried could soothe a coughing lamb. Donovan listened with calm care, answering gently, as though every question carried equal worth. As the afternoon ripened into evening, the sky softened into shades of rose and lavender. Shadows stretched across the square, long and gentle, touching one another until they seemed to weave the village together. One by one, lanterns were lit, their flames flickering like small, patient stars. The fountain's surface caught their glow, blending firelight with the fading day. The three companions found a bench beneath a chestnut tree, its leaves whispering softly in the breeze. They sat in companionable silence, watching as villagers carried baskets home, as shutters closed one by one, as the quiet song of night began its first notes. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice hushed. "When I look at this place, it feels as if day and night are already together. The lamps glow like stars, the sky still holds light. It is twilight, painted across the earth." Donovan smiled faintly, his gaze steady on the square. "Perhaps that is the secret, Sebastian. Perhaps we search not to change the world, but to notice the moments where both sides meet. Twilight and dawn, shadow and glow. They are always present, if we are patient enough to see them." Lockwood nodded, folding his hands in his lap. A man may toil at the forge or till the field, yet at dusk, all share the same quiet. It is a reminder that balance belongs to everyone, not only to the dreamers. They stayed until the sky deepened to indigo, until the first real stars emerged, bright and steady. The village had folded itself into slumber, with only the murmur of the fountain and the occasional lowing of cattle carrying through the night. Before returning to the keep, Donovan rose and placed a sprig of rosemary at the fountain's edge. "For remembrance," he said softly, his voice carried away by the breeze, "so that we do not forget the stillness that twilight grants." The walk back was slow and soothing. Fireflies blinked in the meadows, their glow answering the stars above. The air cooled, carrying the scent of earth and grass, the faint sweetness of wildflowers closing for the night. Each step felt lighter than the last, as though the land itself guided them home. At the keep, the three lit the hearth once more. Its flames stretched upward, golden and calm, filling the stone chamber with warmth. They ate bread with honey, sipped tea brewed from Lockwood's herbs, and let silence weave itself around them again. Sebastian opened his journal and sketched the village square as he had seen it. Lanterns glowing, water shimmering, villagers moving slowly toward their homes. He added notes in the margin. "Twilight is a bridge, not an end." Donovan glanced over, his eyes soft, his lips curving in approval. "The village has its own alchemy," Donovan said at last. "Not of fire and stone, but of peace. It turns labor into rest, noise into song, day into night. We can learn much from it." Lockwood raised his cup in quiet agreement. "May our work follow the same rhythm. Not hurried, not forced, but steady as the sun's path and the moon's watch." Outside, the stars grew denser, their light falling softly through the windows. The keep, surrounded by forest and meadow, seemed like an island of calm in a sea of darkness. Within its walls, the three companions settled into rest, their thoughts carried by the memory of the lantern-lit village, the whisper of the fountain, the hush of dusk. As sleep claimed them, the image of twilight lingered. It was not an experiment nor a formula. It was a gift, freely given, waiting only to be noticed. And in their dreams, day and night touched hands once more, cradling them in balance as gentle as breath. Chapter 4: Whispers Beneath the Stars. The keep was hushed, its stones holding the warmth of the hearth long after the fire dwindled to embers. Outside, night had gathered in full, draping the forest in a mantle of silver and shadow. The air was cool, carrying scents of pine and distant streams, the silence broken only by the whisper of leaves shifting against one another. Donovan lay awake on his cot, his mind turning softly, not restless, but alive, like a stream murmuring to itself. Beside him, Sebastian's breathing was slow and steady, while Lockwood shifted occasionally, the kind of movement that belonged to half-dreams. The alchemist rose quietly, his robe brushing the floor, and stepped into the courtyard. Above him, the sky unfolded in all its majesty. Countless stars burned with patient light, not harsh, but steady, like 1,000 lanterns placed in perfect harmony. The moon drifted just above the horizon, pale and calm, casting a path of silver across the keep stones. Donovan tilted his face upward, letting the vastness fill him. Soon, footsteps joined him. Lockwood, drawn by instinct rather than sound, appeared with a cloak wrapped around his shoulders. "I knew you would seek the stars tonight," he murmured, his voice soft enough to belong to the breeze. Sebastian followed, journal already in hand, his eyes wide with the reverence of one who sees not only light, but story within it. "It feels as though the heavens themselves lean closer," he whispered, settling on a bench near the courtyard wall. They stood together in silence for a while, each wrapped in their own thoughts. The stars were too vast for chatter, too eternal for careless words. It was Lockwood who finally spoke, his gaze still fixed upward. "Donovan, do you ever fear that what you seek cannot be found? That to bind day and night is to ask the sky to surrender its order." Donovan's lips curved faintly, though his eyes remained steady on the constellations above. "I do not ask the sky to surrender, old friend. I ask only to listen. Perhaps the balance already exists, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to understand." Sebastian sketched quickly, his pencil moving across the page, tracing the lines of constellations. He marked how Orion's belt leaned toward the curve of the moon, how the Pleiades shimmered like a cluster of lanterns, how each star seemed part of a story older than any kingdom. He looked up, voice trembling with wonder. What if day and night are not enemies at all, but companions who take turns watching the world? What if you are not changing the order, Donovan, but only reminding us of its kindness? The alchemist turned to him, eyes glimmering in the starlight. "That is wisdom, Sebastian. The stars themselves whisper such truths, if we are willing to listen." They moved toward the edge of the courtyard, where Donovan kept his instruments. A tall brass telescope polished to a soft glow, a series of glass lenses arranged carefully on wooden stands, and a set of parchment charts inked with celestial maps. Tonight, the tools seemed less like machines and more like companions, eager to share in the night's secrets. Lockwood leaned over one of the maps, his finger tracing the arc of the moon. "It waxes and wanes, never clinging to one form. Even in its changing, there is constancy. Perhaps this is the lesson of balance, that permanence lies not in stillness, but in rhythm." Donovan nodded, adjusting the telescope. "And in rhythm lies harmony. The sun rises not to defeat the night, but to follow it. The stars do not vanish at dawn. They only dim, waiting, patient." They took turns gazing through the telescope, each breath catching softly as new worlds revealed themselves. Craters etched on the moon's surface, stars doubled and tripled in delicate clusters, the faint streak of a comet carving its way across the heavens. Sebastian pressed the image into his journal, his hand trembling as if he feared the page unworthy of such beauty. "It feels alive," he whispered, "as though the sky itself breathes, slow and endless." Lockwood closed his eyes, his voice a murmur. "Every flame above us is a memory of fire long extinguished, yet it still shines. Even in absence, light endures." The words lingered in the cool air, neither challenged nor explained. They belonged to the night, carried upward like prayer. As the hours passed, the three sat close by the courtyard wall, the stone cool beneath them. The silence between them was not emptiness, but fullness, like the quiet inside a chapel or the stillness of dawn. Each man felt the stars weaving into him, as if the heavens were stitching threads of silver and shadow into their souls. At last, Donovan spoke, his voice low, steady, certain. "This is why I seek what I seek, not to command the sky, nor to break the rhythm of day and night, but to honor it, to show the world that balance is not only possible, but already here, waiting to be seen. If we could capture even a fragment of this harmony, imagine the peace it could bring." Sebastian lifted his gaze from the journal, his young eyes shining. "It would be like giving the world twilight forever. Not darkness, not brightness, but something gentler, kinder." Lockwood, though cautious by nature, did not argue. Instead, he placed a hand on Donovan's shoulder, firm and grounding. "Then let us walk this path with patience. The stars themselves took ages to carve their patterns. We must not rush what is meant to unfold slowly." The moon climbed higher, and with it came a deeper hush. Owls called softly from the forest. The brook below the keep murmured its steady song. The stars burned on, steady as breath. When at last weariness claimed them, they returned to their cots, each carrying the stillness of the night within. Donovan lay awake for a while longer, staring at the ceiling beams glowing faintly in moonlight. His heart did not race, nor did it sink. It rested in rhythm with the stars, in step with the night. Before sleep closed his eyes, he whispered to himself words no one else could hear. I do not chase the sun, I only follow the stars. And so the night passed, not in silence, but in whispers, gentle, eternal, endless. Chapter 5: The First Experiment of Dawn. The first pale hints of morning drifted across the horizon like a breath of gold on silk. The keep rested in this soft light, its stones glowing faintly, as though holding the night's dreams a little longer. Dew clung to the garden herbs, beads of crystal trembling gently in the hush of dawn. It was not a loud morning, nor a hurried one. It was the kind of morning that asked the world to rise slowly, like a yawn stretched beneath blankets. Donovan stood in the courtyard, cloak wrapped loosely around his shoulders. His hands rested on the wooden railing where vines had begun to climb, their leaves stirring faintly in the breeze. He did not look toward the sun, not yet. Instead, his gaze lingered on the dimming stars above, each one fading with such grace that it seemed the sky was singing them to rest. Lockwood approached, as he often did, carrying 2 cups of warmed milk, each steaming faintly. He handed one to Donovan without a word. They sipped together in silence, listening to the slow waking of birds. You've chosen this morning, haven't you? Lockwood finally asked, his tone calm, not questioning but knowing. Donovan's lips curved in a quiet smile. The night taught us patience. Now, the dawn will teach us courage. Behind them, Sebastian appeared, his hair still mussed from sleep, journal clutched in one hand, quill in the other. His eyes were wide with the excitement of one who lived half in dreams, half in stories. Will it be today? He asked, his voice hushed, reverent, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the balance of light itself. Yes, Donovan replied softly, setting his cup aside. Today, I will attempt the first blending. The courtyard had been prepared days earlier. At its center stood a polished stone table, etched with intricate patterns of circles and spirals. Donovan had carved them himself, careful to keep their curves smooth, gentle, flowing like water. Around the table rested a series of vessels, crystal jars filled with starlight caught on silver threads, a basin of dew gathered from the hour before dawn, and a lantern whose flame had been lit by the setting sun. Lockwood observed the arrangement with his usual caution, his eyes sharp though never unkind. Every piece here was taken with reverence. Let us hope the sky grants us the same in return. Sebastian leaned forward eagerly, tracing the carved spirals with his finger. It looks like the path of the stars themselves, he whispered, as though you've etched the heavens into stone. Donovan nodded, his voice a low hum. That is what this is, Sebastian. Not an act of defiance, but of reflection. If the sky holds balance, then let us mirror it. He lifted the lantern first, its flame flickering softly, gold with hints of red. He placed it in the center of the stone table, where the spiral's heart lay. Around it, he arranged the jars of starlight, their faint glow weaving a silver ring. Finally, he poured the dew into the shallow channels etched into the stone, letting it trickle like a river, carrying the reflections of both flame and star. The 3 men stepped back. For a long moment, there was only stillness, the kind of pause that hung between heartbeats, between breaths, between the fading of night and the rising of day. And then the light began to shift. The lantern's flame leaned outward, stretching in soft tendrils as if drawn by the silver glow of the jars. The starlight, though faint in the waking dawn, shimmered brighter when touched by the flame's warmth. Together, they seemed to weave, not colliding, not consuming, but folding into one another, gold and silver, warmth and coolness, day and night. Sebastian gasped, pressing his hand over his mouth, eyes wide as he watched the dance unfold. "It's beautiful," he whispered, "like twilight, but alive." The dew caught this mingled glow, carrying it along the etched spirals until the whole table shimmered with a quiet brilliance. It was not dazzling nor overwhelming. It was gentle, calming, a light that soothed rather than startled, as though it had been made for rest as much as for sight. Donovan's breath slowed, his eyes reflecting the glow. For a moment he felt it, the balance he had longed for, the tender meeting of day and night, neither diminished, both honored. It was not a conquest, it was a conversation. Lockwood stood very still, his hand pressed against the railing, his heart steady but deep. "Donovan, what have you done?" His words carried not fear, but awe. The alchemist turned to him, voice quiet as a prayer. "Not changed the world, only reminded it of what it already holds." The light continued to weave, but as the true sun rose higher, the flame and starlight began to waver. The balance trembled, as though the sky itself whispered, "Not yet, but close." Slowly, gently, the silver glow dimmed. The flame returned to its natural warmth. The dew's shimmer faded into the brightness of morning. The experiment had ended not in failure, but in promise. Sebastian scribbled furiously in his journal, his words tumbling out like a river. It worked. It worked for a moment. It was real. He looked up, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "Did you see it? Did you feel it?" It was as though the world sighed in peace. Donovan rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, steady, grounding. "Yes, Sebastian, I saw it, I felt it, and we will see it again." This was only the beginning. Lockwood exhaled slowly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "A beginning, yes, but let us tread with care, for beginnings are fragile things." Chapter 6: Echoes of the Twilight Light. The keep was quiet after the experiment, its halls carrying only the low hum of wind against stone and the distant calls of morning birds. Yet within that quiet rested something new, something unseen but deeply felt. A gentle echo of the light Donovan had summoned, lingering not in the air, but in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Donovan moved slowly through his workshop, the long wooden tables lined with glass jars, copper vessels, and scrolls scattered like leaves after autumn winds. His steps were measured, his cloak brushing the floor softly, as though he feared even sound might disturb the memory of what they had achieved. On one of the tables rested the lantern from the experiment, its flame now ordinary, warm but unremarkable. Yet as he gazed at it, Donovan swore he still saw a trace of silver woven in the gold, like the afterglow of a dream that clung even after waking. Lockwood entered quietly, carrying a tray of bread and fruit. He set it down without a word, but his eyes spoke plainly, watchful, steady, always protective. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms as Donovan traced the spiral pattern carved into one of his notebooks. "You haven't stopped thinking about it," Lockwood said softly. Donovan smiled faintly, though his gaze remained on the page. "How could I?" For a moment the world listened. It was not forced. It was harmony, and harmony must be studied. Lockwood nodded, tearing off a piece of bread and chewing slowly. "Just remember, Donovan, the sky offers gifts, but it does not give them lightly. Tread softly." The alchemist raised his eyes, meeting Lockwood's with quiet warmth. "I always do." From the far corner, Sebastian stirred from his seat, where he had fallen asleep over his journal. Ink stains smudged across his fingers. He blinked blearily, sitting up with a yawn that squeaked into a laugh. "I dreamed of it," he announced, his voice carrying the unfiltered wonder of youth. The light, it was like the stars and sun were speaking, telling us secrets too old for words. Donovan chuckled softly, moving to adjust the boy's blanket. "Then your dream is wiser than most books, Sebastian." The boy grinned, scribbling hurried notes as though to capture the fragments of that dream before they slipped away. Later that day, Donovan returned to the courtyard where the experiment had taken place. The morning had passed into a gentle afternoon, the air warm with sunlight that filtered through drifting clouds. The stone table still bore faint traces of dew in its carved channels, though the starlight jars had dimmed to their usual quiet glow. He rested his hands upon the table's surface, feeling its coolness, its stillness, its readiness to listen once more. Closing his eyes, he let his breath slow, listening. Not to the air, not to the wind, but to the memory of what had been. The courtyard seemed to hum with it faintly, a low vibration, as though the stone itself remembered the blending of light. He did not seek to summon it again, not yet. Instead, he sought to understand its echo, to honor it by being still enough to hear. Footsteps approached behind him, light and unhurried. It was Lockwood again, though this time he carried no tray, no words of caution. Instead, he simply stood beside Donovan, gazing at the sky where pale clouds drifted lazily across blue. "Do you hear it?" Donovan asked at last, his voice a whisper. Lockwood frowned faintly, listening. "What am I meant to hear?" "The echo," Donovan said, pressing his hand more firmly to the stone. "Not with the ears, with the quiet between heartbeats." They stood in silence, the afternoon sun warming their shoulders, the breeze carrying the faint perfume of the herb garden nearby. After some time, Lockwood exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing. "Perhaps I do," he admitted. Sebastian joined them soon after, bounding into the courtyard with the energy only a boy could hold. He clutched his journal tightly, waving it in the air. "I wrote down the patterns of light I saw," he exclaimed, though his voice quickly softened, remembering the hush that hung over the keep. They looked like threads, gold and silver threads, woven into a tapestry. Donovan smiled, kneeling so that he met Sebastian's eager eyes. "And what did the tapestry show?" Sebastian tilted his head, thinking deeply. Not pictures, not faces, just peace, like the world was breathing and everything was safe. Donovan's heart warmed at the boy's words. He ruffled Sebastian's hair gently. "Then you understood more than I did, my young friend." For the next several days, the keep existed in a rhythm of quiet observation. Donovan did not rush to repeat the experiment. Instead, he moved through his hours slowly, gathering dew at dawn, watching the way moonlight curved through windows, noting how firelight bent when touched by a draft. His journals filled with sketches of spirals, of waves, of weaving lines that hinted at the meeting place of opposites. Lockwood remained steady at his side, ever practical, reminding him to eat, to rest, to step away from the work when the hours grew long. Sebastian darted in and out like a bird, carrying wildflowers to place on the stone table, or whispering his dreams aloud in case they held meaning. At night, when the keep was still, Donovan sometimes walked alone to the highest tower. From there, he gazed at the stars, the vast river of silver across the black. He whispered to them, not spells, not commands, only gratitude. Gratitude for their patience, their constancy, their willingness to lend even a fragment of themselves to his search. And sometimes, if the night was quiet enough, he thought he saw them flicker in reply. The echo of the twilight light remained, not in brilliance, but in softness. It was in the way the air felt calmer when they entered the courtyard. It was in the way Sebastian slept more soundly, his dreams sweeter. It was in the way Lockwood's guarded heart seemed to ease, if only a little. It was not just an experiment now. It was a presence, a reminder, and Donovan knew, with the certainty of the stars above him, that this was only the beginning of what the world might one day allow him to weave. Chapter 7: The Garden of Silver Dawn. The keep's gardens stretched in quiet rows beneath the rising dawn, each leaf and blade tipped with dew that sparkled faintly as though the stars themselves had descended to rest there. The air was cool, touched by the faintest silver mist, and the world seemed to hold its breath in that tender moment before the sun rose fully. Donovan often came here at such an hour. His experiments, though housed within stone walls, were rooted in nature's gifts, and he knew that knowledge without reverence was nothing at all. He walked slowly now between the garden beds, his hands clasped loosely behind him, pausing often to study a flower's curve or the shimmer of moisture upon a stem. Lockwood followed a short pace behind, his boots whispering across the damp earth. He was not a man of flowers, but his eyes softened nonetheless as he watched Donovan kneel to examine a sprig of lavender. "Do you believe," Lockwood asked quietly, "that the earth and sky speak the same tongue?" Donovan smiled, brushing dew from his fingers. "They do not merely speak, my friend. They sing. It is only that we must learn to listen without rushing." Nearby, Sebastian knelt eagerly among the rows, his small fingers busy gathering marigolds and sprigs of mint into a bundle. He hummed as he worked, a tune without words, cheerful yet oddly fitting in the misty morning. When he looked up, his cheeks flushed with the cool air, his eyes glimmered with excitement. "I dreamed again," he announced suddenly, holding out a flower, this time of a garden in the sky. The stars were flowers, and they leaned down to whisper secrets to the roots. Donovan took the marigold gently, studying it in his palm. "And what secret did they share with you, Sebastian?" The boy grinned. "That the roots already knew. They were only reminding them." Donovan laughed softly, the sound like the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Wise stars indeed. They moved together toward the central fountain of the garden, a stone basin where water trickled endlessly from a carved spout, clear and cool. The water caught the first rays of light, scattering them into soft gold ripples that touched their faces. Here Donovan set his satchel down, drawing forth glass vials, small copper dishes, and strips of parchment inscribed with delicate symbols. He began to arrange them upon the fountain's edge, his movements unhurried, each placement deliberate. "Today," he said gently, "we will not seek brilliance, we will seek harmony, the blending of scents, of water, of light and leaf, a weaving so soft the world might not even notice, yet it will feel it deep within." Sebastian's eyes widened, eager as always. "Will it shine like before?" Donovan shook his head, his tone soothing. "No, child, not shine. Glow, like a lantern hidden in fog. A reminder, not a command." Lockwood settled onto a nearby bench, folding his arms but watching with quiet patience. Though cautious by nature, even he felt no tension here. The morning itself seemed to hold them in gentle stillness, urging trust. Donovan began by selecting herbs, lavender for calm, mint for clarity, rosemary for memory. He placed them into the copper dishes, grinding them slowly with a pestle until their scents drifted upward, mingling in the cool air. Each fragrance seemed to soften the space, weaving with the mist and morning light. Next, he filled the glass vials with water from the fountain, the liquid catching sunlight in small glimmers. He held each vial carefully, whispering words of thanks before setting them alongside the herbs. Finally, he unrolled the parchment strips, their symbols curling like vines across the surface. These were not spells in the usual sense, but reminders, drawings that mirrored the spirals and threads Donovan had seen in the twilight light. He placed them gently beneath the vials, letting the paper absorb drops of water as though drinking in the harmony. Sebastian leaned forward, his chin resting in his hands, utterly still. Lockwood's eyes softened despite himself. When all was arranged, Donovan lifted his hands and let them hover above the small gathering of herb, water, and symbol. He did not speak loudly, nor did he force the air to bend. He simply breathed, slow, steady, and allowed his breath to move through the space like a breeze. The herbs released their fragrance more fully, the water shimmered faintly, and for a moment, the mist seemed to glow. It was not a blaze nor even a spark. It was a hush made visible, a reminder that the world held peace deep within, waiting only to be noticed. Sebastian gasped softly, but his sound was reverent, not disruptive. "It feels safe," he whispered. Donovan smiled, lowering his hands. "Then it has worked. Harmony is not a spectacle. It is a quiet friend." They lingered there in the garden, not rushing to clear the vials or fold the parchments. The fragrance of the herbs clung to their clothes, and the water rippled gently, as if content. Birds began to sing, their calls threading softly into the moment, weaving with the echo of Donovan's work until it became indistinguishable from nature itself. Lockwood rose slowly, stretching his arms with a faint smile. "This I prefer," he admitted. "No risks, no trembling walls, only stillness." Donovan looked up at him, eyes kind. "Stillness can change the world as surely as fire." Sebastian nodded vigorously, holding one of the vials up to the light. "It's like the stars in a jar, but quiet stars. Stars that whisper instead of shout." Donovan laughed softly, patting the boy's shoulder. "Exactly so." They left the vials upon the fountain's edge, deciding to let them rest there through the day. Perhaps the water would carry their harmony into the roots of the garden, perhaps into the air, perhaps nowhere at all. But Donovan believed such things were never wasted. As they stepped away, the mist began to lift, revealing the fuller glow of morning. Sunlight spread across the keep, touching the stones with warmth, glimmering off windows, setting the courtyard alive with golden shimmer. And yet, beneath it all, the faint echo of silver harmony remained, gentle, unseen, but deeply present. Donovan paused at the garden gate, turning once more to gaze at the fountain, the herbs, the stillness. He breathed deeply, letting the air fill his chest, then exhaled slowly, carrying his gratitude outward. "This," he murmured almost to himself, "is the true alchemy, not turning night to day, but reminding both they are already whole." Lockwood glanced at him but did not speak, his eyes reflecting quiet agreement. Sebastian skipped ahead, his laughter soft, as though even joy had learned to tread gently here. Together they returned to the keep, leaving the garden bathed in golden morning light and silver echoes of peace. Chapter 8: The Moonlit Chamber. The keep grew quieter after sunset, its corridors hushed as though the very stones listened for dreams. Donovan preferred these hours, for though his heart longed to soften day into night and night into day, he knew the moon held its own wisdom, one worth listening to. The moonlit chamber lay at the highest point of the keep, just beneath the tower's domed roof. Its walls curved in a perfect circle, pale stone polished smooth until it reflected even the faintest gleam. A great window opened onto the sky, its panes divided into slender arches, so the chamber filled with the silver of moonlight whenever the night was clear. This night, the moon was nearly full, rising high and luminous, casting its glow across the chamber floor. The light pooled like liquid, a river of silver flowing across stone. Donovan stepped softly into the space, his satchel resting against his side. Behind him came Lockwood, steady and watchful, and Sebastian, his small feet padding quickly to keep pace. The boy ran to the window first, pressing his hands against the cool glass. "It's so close tonight," he whispered in awe, "like it wants to step inside." Donovan smiled, setting down his satchel near the center of the room. "Perhaps it does. The moon has always been a guest willing to cross thresholds, if we open them gently." Lockwood folded his arms, leaning against the curved wall. "And tonight you mean to open one?" Donovan inclined his head. "Not to force day from night, only to invite them to dance more softly together." He knelt, unfastening the satchel, and drew forth what he had prepared. A shallow silver basin, polished until it gleamed like starlight. 3 vials of water, each taken from the fountain that morning after the harmony work. And a small lantern, its glass unlit, its wick waiting. Sebastian crouched beside him eagerly. Is this like the garden? Only with moon instead of herbs? In a way, Donovan replied gently. But tonight, the moon will be the herb, the root, the fragrance, and the flame. He placed the basin upon the floor so it caught the moonlight streaming through the window. The silver reflected the glow. Bending it into the water, he poured carefully from the vials. The surface rippled, then steadied, until it shimmered with a pale brilliance, as if the basin held not water but liquid light. Sebastian's eyes widened. It looks alive. It is, Donovan murmured. All water is alive. Tonight it listens. He set the lantern beside the basin, its empty glass waiting. Then he whispered words, not incantations but gentle invocations, like greetings. He thanked the moon for its patience, the water for its memory, the air for carrying both. His voice was low, steady, a rhythm like the tides themselves. Lockwood shifted slightly, his skepticism softened by the stillness of the room. Even he felt the quiet power that seemed to thrum faintly in the air, like the deep note of a hidden bell. Donovan lifted the basin slowly, holding it so the moonlight struck the water from above and reflected into the lantern's glass. For a long moment, nothing seemed to change. Then, faintly, the lantern's pane began to glow, not with fire, but with the silver shimmer of the moon. Sebastian gasped, clutching at Lockwood's sleeve. It's catching the moon! Donovan set the basin down carefully, his eyes soft but intent. The lantern glowed faintly, as though filled not with flame but with a gentle silver breath. He touched the glass tenderly, then pulled his hand back, smiling faintly. It will not burn, he said. It will only remind. A lantern of the moon, a flame of memory. Lockwood stepped forward, studying the faint glow. So you've bottled Moonlight? His tone was skeptical but not harsh. What use is it? Donovan looked at him with calm patience. Not use, Lockwood. Presence. To carry the moon where it cannot walk. To show that night can accompany day without ending it. Sebastian knelt close, his face illuminated by the pale glow. His voice was hushed with awe. It feels cool, like holding a dream in your hands. They sat together in the chamber, no one speaking for a time. The lantern glowed softly, filling the round room with silver warmth that was not heat. It was a comfort, a hush, a lullaby made visible. Donovan watched Sebastian's quiet wonder, then turned his gaze to Lockwood. Do you see? It is not conquest. It is companionship. Lockwood exhaled slowly, his brow easing. I begin to see. It does not smother the dark or blind the day. It simply stays. Exactly. Donovan folded his hands in his lap, his eyes gentle. This is the lesson I believe the heavens whisper, that light and dark do not battle, but embrace. We only imagine otherwise because we are afraid. The moonlight lantern shimmered faintly, as though agreeing. Sebastian leaned his cheek against his knees, drowsy now, lulled by the stillness. It feels like it wants to sing, but the song is inside, not out loud. Donovan smiled tenderly, brushing the boy's hair from his face. Then perhaps it is a song meant only for the heart. As the hours deepened, the lantern's glow did not fade, but steadied into a soft constant. Donovan carefully wrapped it in cloth, placing it back into his satchel with reverence. We will carry it with us, he said quietly, not as a weapon, but as a companion. Wherever we go, night will walk beside us, even under noon's glare. Lockwood nodded slowly, a rare hint of respect softening his gaze. Perhaps your dream is not madness after all. Donovan's smile was gentle, though tinged with weariness. Madness and vision are often mistaken for one another, but the difference lies in whether others can share the peace it brings. They left the chamber together, the moon still pouring its light through the tall window, silver and serene. As they descended the spiral stairs, Sebastian clutched Donovan's hand, half asleep, murmuring softly. "Lantern of the moon," he whispered. "A friend that glows without fire." Donovan squeezed the boy's hand gently, carrying both the satchel and the quiet hope that perhaps, at last, he was learning not to force the heavens into obedience, but to listen to their songs. And above them, the moon kept its watch silent, patient, eternal. Chapter 9, The Eclipse of Silence. The morning after their work in the moonlit chamber, the keep awoke to soft mist. The gardens were veiled in pale silver, dew clinging to each blade of grass like scattered pearls. The world felt suspended, as though caught between night and day, a pause before the sun could find its strength. Donovan stood in the courtyard, his satchel close at hand. Within it, the moonlit lantern rested, still glowing faintly beneath its cloth covering. The thought of it brought him peace, yet also a deeper question. If moonlight could be held, might sunlight too be invited? Not as fire, not as a blaze, but as a calm companion? Lockwood joined him, his cloak drawn against the chill. "You've been quiet since last night," he said, studying Donovan's expression. "Are you planning something more?" Donovan's gaze softened as he looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise with gentle strokes of rose and gold. "Yes, I wish to try bringing them together, not to erase their difference, but to let them rest in the same vessel, if only for a moment." Lockwood raised a brow. "A dangerous thought." "Not dangerous," Donovan corrected gently. "Delicate." Sebastian appeared then, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, his curls tousled from his pillow. "You mean to make them friends, don't you?" Donovan smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Yes, Sebastian, to see if the lantern can carry both songs, the silver hum of the moon and the golden warmth of the sun." They climbed together to the eastern terrace of the keep, a high platform where the first light of morning spilled freely across the stone. The mist parted slowly as the sun lifted, beams stretching like soft arms across the earth. Donovan placed the lantern on the terrace wall and uncovered it. Its pale glow still shimmered, as though carrying a piece of midnight within. Against the rising dawn, it looked almost fragile, but also steadfast. He opened his satchel again, this time drawing forth a crystal vial filled with water he had taken at sunrise the previous day. The liquid caught the morning light and broke it into gentle colors: amber, rose, and gold. Sebastian leaned close, whispering as though afraid to startle it. "It's like a little piece of dawn." Donovan nodded. "The sun gives its gift freely every day, but most rush past it. Today we ask it to linger." Lockwood crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "And you will pour it into the same lantern?" "Yes," Donovan said calmly. "Not to conquer one with the other, but to let them breathe together. If they can sit side by side without struggle, then perhaps we too may learn." The terrace grew still, the breeze soft, the sound of birds waking faint in the trees below. Donovan set the vial beside the lantern, then closed his eyes. He whispered again, not commands but greetings, thanking the dawn for its patience, the lantern for its willingness, and the moon for its quiet endurance. With a slow, careful hand, he uncorked the vial and let a single drop fall onto the lantern's glass. For an instant, the glow flickered, silver dimming, gold wavering, as though uncertain whether to mingle or retreat. The three of them held their breath. Then silence. The lantern stilled. Its glow neither brightened nor dimmed, but shifted. No longer only silver, no longer only gold, but a hue between. A pale radiance that carried warmth without heat and coolness without cold. It was soft, steady, like the hush of twilight when the day kisses the night. Sebastian's eyes grew wide with wonder. It's both. It's like the sky when the sun is saying goodnight and the moon is saying hello. Lockwood leaned closer, the sternness in his face easing. An eclipse without shadow, he murmured. Donovan's lips curved in a faint smile. The eclipse of silence, he said softly. Not darkness swallowing light, nor light devouring dark. Simply stillness, a pause that holds them both. The lantern hummed faintly, a vibration they could feel rather than hear. It was not the pulse of power, but of peace. Donovan bowed his head, deeply moved. For so long he had sought to command, to shape, to alter the heavens. Yet here, in this quiet glow, he realized the truth. Harmony did not require mastery. It required listening. Sebastian reached forward with small fingers, resting his hand lightly against the lantern. His breath caught, then steadied. It feels like a lullaby, he whispered. Donovan touched the boy's shoulder gently. And that is enough. The world does not always need flames or thunder. Sometimes it needs only a quiet song. They sat together on the terrace as the sun rose higher, the lantern glowing with its twilight shimmer. The mist lifted slowly, unveiling the green of fields and the sparkle of the river below. Yet within their circle, all remained hushed, as though the very morning respected their silence. Lockwood, usually so guarded, spoke at last with a softer tone. You've proven something, Donovan. Not that night can be turned to day or day into night, but that they are willing to sit beside each other, if only we stop quarreling on their behalf. Donovan smiled, the lines of weariness easing from his face. Yes, perhaps the alchemy was never about forcing change, but about remembering friendship. The lantern continued to glow, steady and unhurried. Sebastian leaned against Donovan's arm, his eyelids heavy with drowsiness, though the morning was young. Lockwood kept his silence, but his gaze softened as he looked at them both, as though, just for a moment, he too wished the world could remain caught in this pause. When at last the sun climbed fully, the lantern dimmed slightly, as though bowing to the day. Donovan covered it again with reverent hands and returned it to his satchel. It has given enough for now, he said quietly. Every gift must rest. They descended the terrace steps together, leaving behind the mist, the dawn, and the silence. Yet the hush lingered within them, a memory they carried, as if the eclipse of silence still glowed softly inside their chests, and the world, in its vast patience, seemed to breathe with them. Chapter 10: The Final Dawn. The night passed gently in the keep, its halls lit only by embers and the lingering hush of the eclipse of silence. The air itself seemed quieter, as though the world had listened to Donovan's lantern and chosen to echo its calm. No owl called too loudly, no wind rattled the shutters. Only the steady rhythm of breath and the soft, unseen turning of the stars. Donovan slept, though lightly, his dreams threaded with images of twilight skies where the moon and sun stood together, unhurried and unafraid. When he woke, it was to the faintest warmth upon his cheek, the first suggestion of morning. He rose slowly, taking care not to disturb Sebastian, who lay curled on a pallet near the hearth. His small face softened in slumber. The boy clutched a folded blanket as though it were a talisman, his chest rising and falling in deep, contented rhythm. Lockwood, in his own chamber, had not yet stirred, though Donovan suspected he too lay awake, thinking. The alchemist moved through the quiet halls, each step measured, as though he feared breaking the spell of the keep's serenity. He carried the lantern in his satchel, though today he had no plan to use it. Not to test, not to coax, not to demand. Instead, he wished only to bear witness. At the eastern terrace, where they had gathered the day before, Donovan stepped into the open air. The sky before him was still tender with dawn, streaked with colors that seemed almost shy: pale rose, lavender, the faintest glimmers of gold. The mist clung low in the valleys, veiling the rivers and forests in soft folds of silver. He drew the lantern from his satchel and set it on the stone wall, uncovering it just enough for a sliver of glow to slip free. It shimmered faintly, not silver alone, not gold alone, but that pale, in-between hue that spoke of harmony. Donovan's hands rested on the stone, his head bowed. His voice was low, meant not for others but for the sky itself. "For so long I sought to master you," he murmured, "to bring day into night, to hold the sun in my grasp, to rewrite the rhythm of the heavens. But you do not ask to be changed. You ask to be seen." The lantern pulsed once, almost imperceptibly, and Donovan smiled. He lifted his gaze, watching the horizon as the sun rose higher. The moon, pale and fading, still lingered above the opposite hills, reluctant to leave. For a moment, they shared the same sky, sun and moon, gold and silver. Donovan's heart swelled, not with triumph, but with peace. The sound of footsteps behind him broke the stillness, though gently. Lockwood emerged, his cloak drawn against the chill. His expression, usually so sharp, had softened. "You are awake early," he said, his tone lacking its usual edge. Donovan inclined his head. "The sky called me." Lockwood stood beside him, gazing at the horizon. They were silent together for a time, the only sound the distant trill of waking birds. At length, Lockwood spoke. "You've changed." Donovan chuckled softly, though it was not a sound of defense, but of quiet agreement. "Perhaps, or perhaps I have only remembered what I should never have forgotten, that the world is not mine to command. It is mine to cherish." Lockwood studied him with a gaze that carried both respect and a trace of wonder. "Then your search is complete?" Donovan rested a hand on the lantern, feeling its warmth seep gently into his palm. "Yes, not because I found what I sought, but because I learned I need not seek. The sky already gives. The sun rises, the moon lingers, the stars sing. My alchemy was never to change them, but to learn their language." Sebastian appeared then, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his curls untamed by the night. He stumbled forward with the endearing clumsiness of one not yet fully awake. "Did I miss it?" he asked, his voice thick with drowsiness. Donovan knelt, opening his arms. "No, little one. Come. The day is only beginning." Sebastian climbed into his embrace, nestling against Donovan's chest as the alchemist turned his gaze once more to the sky. The boy's warmth was steady, grounding, a reminder that the truest alchemy was not found in vessels or vials, but in connection, one heart steadying another. The three of them, alchemist, skeptic, and child, stood together on the terrace as the sun claimed the sky. The mist thinned, revealing fields bathed in golden light. Birds soared higher, their wings catching the dawn. The keep itself seemed to glow, its stone walls reflecting warmth that was not fire but something older, gentler. Donovan reached for the lantern one final time, lifting it so the morning sun struck its glass. The twilight glow within mingled with the golden rays, creating a shimmer so soft it seemed more dream than substance. Then, slowly, reverently, Donovan drew the cloth over it again and placed it back in the satchel. "It has done enough," he said quietly. "It does not need to shine forever. Its gift is not its light, but the reminder that harmony is possible." Lockwood exhaled, a breath that seemed to release years of caution and doubt. "And what now?" he asked. Donovan smiled, his eyes lingering on the horizon where the sun climbed ever higher. "Now we live. We teach Sebastian the names of the stars. We walk the gardens. We sit by the fire when evenings come. And when dawn calls again, we answer, not with questions, but with gratitude." Sebastian tugged at Donovan's sleeve. "And stories, always stories," Donovan said, pressing a kiss to the boy's hair. For stories are how the night and day speak to us when we forget to listen. The terrace grew warm beneath the sunlight. Shadows stretched, gentle and unhurried, across the stone. The world carried on, unchanged and yet somehow renewed. Donovan closed his eyes, letting the warmth settle into his bones, letting the hush of the moment carry him.